So, Steve, we've heard a lot from the president talking about wanting an interest rate cut of some kind,
Hmm.
but the Fed won't budge. What is the reasoning behind holding things the same? Other countries have cut.
Yeah, they have. I think the big thing that Fed Chair Powell has continued to point at is the idea that the tariff policies that have been put in place by the current administration are going to lead to some increases in inflation indexes. Now, I think longer term, Rick, what we would say is tariffs like taxes are more of a growth issue than an inflation issue. But even this morning, we got a report on CPI, and core CPI went from 2.9% year over year last month to 3.1% year over year this month. So we are seeing some impact of tariffs on the inflation indexes. But Rick, there was another really important economic number that we got out a week and a half ago, and that was the employment data for July, which showed that job growth is not nearly as strong as what we had expected or what we thought, because there was this huge downward revision, 258,000 fewer jobs in the previous 2 months than what we thought. And President Trump reacted to that. He fired the person at the Bureau of Labor Statistics that's responsible for that monthly report. Whether that was warranted, what that means, we can talk about that more if you want. But the bottom line on that is that the Fed has a dual mandate: price stability and full employment. And what is clear is that the job market, while it's not weak by any means, is not nearly as strong as it was. And that calls Fed Chair Powell's reticence, if you will, on not lowering interest rates into question. And as we sit here today, their next meeting's in September. The markets are pricing a near 100% chance that they're going to lower interest rates by 25 basis points at their next meeting in September.
What is the reason for holding this steady? Is it still the fighting of inflation?
Sure.
Is that the main reason this is being held on for so long?
Yeah, sure. And look, it's an important fight on the part of the Fed. The Fed's target's 2%. We're above that rate of an inflation. We're making progress. We're certainly not where we were 18 or 24 months ago when we were running at 8 and 9%. We're way past that. But Rick, the difference between a 2% inflation rate and a 3% inflation rate doesn't sound that bad. It's a 50% difference. And over a longer period of time, that difference in inflation makes a huge difference. And I think the important part to remember about this is that inflation inevitably hurts those who can least afford it the worst. This is about trying to make sure that price stability is there for the bottom half of income earners who have to spend more of their incomes on necessities. They clearly are impacted: food, energy, insurance, all the things that all of us see that are still higher in price. In fact, when I travel and I make presentations, one of the questions I normally ask my audience is, okay, thinking about your own personal rate of inflation, is it less than, the same, or higher than what the government stated rate of inflation is? And we'll just use CPI at 2.7%. I've never had anybody say their personal rate of inflation is the same or lower. Everybody thinks, no, my rate of inflation is higher than that. If you've gotten an updated insurance bill for your house, for your car, if you think about going to the grocery store, now we are getting some relief on gasoline prices here recently, but overall, we can go back to the start of the pandemic, and inflation's up about 26%. Think about that. We've lost a quarter of our spending power since the beginning of the pandemic, and that's more than wages have increased since then. So we all know we're paying more and we're getting less than we were before. So this fight from the Fed to get inflation lower is very important. It may mean that growth is a little bit slower than what we would like, but in between, the risk they have of lowering rates too soon, Rick, is if they spur economic growth and that triggers that inflation rate to start to go back up, then they've really kind of shot themselves in the foot on what they're trying to accomplish with monetary policy.
When it comes to the middle class and working class and things. What does this look like as far as, I mean, I can tell the homes in my neighborhood are not selling as fast. Is this
Yep.
my credit cards, my auto loans, all of this? Is that what this is all tied to?
Yeah, and look, let's be clear. This is where it's really important, Rick, that you bring up housing. Look, that's a affordability is at multi-generational lows. That's a combination of not just mortgage rate, but prices are higher. In fact, since the onset of the pandemic, home prices are up 50%. They're up more than the rate of inflation. So when we think about housing, this is more about a supply issue. It's about the price of homes. Yes, you see it here in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. There are a few more homes for sale. They're staying on the market a little bit longer. Price cuts are a little bit more prevalent than they were. But Rick, I know as you look at listing prices like I do, sometimes the initial listing price, I'm like, wow, I don't know about that. It's like the sellers are still trying to get this premium price, and I'm not sure the market still will still support that. But here's the other thing about interest rates, and you mentioned credit cards. Those rates are generally tied to short-term interest rates. So as the Fed lowers interest rates, you'll see those rates come down. That's good. The bad part, credit cards are still over 20%. I'm not sure the difference between 20 and a half and 20.25% is really going to help you if you're having to use credit card debt to make ends meet on a monthly basis. Car loans are kind of a hybrid, some short-term rates, some longer term, but home mortgage rates, Rick, the Fed does not control that market. Those are priced off of the 10-year Treasury. In fact, if we go back and look at home mortgage rates to when the Fed did lower rates 100 basis points in last fall, home mortgage rates are actually 25 to 50 basis points higher than that because we've seen longer term rates move up as the idea was the Fed's lowering interest rates. That increases economic activity. That means that inflation might stay a little bit longer over the longer term. And this brings up kind of one of the dichotomies, if you will, between how President Trump is approaching this. Clearly, he wants lower interest rates. And by the way, he's not the first president to want lower interest rates. We'd probably say every president has wanted lower interest rates. But when he starts thinking about 1%, we're not going to get rates to that level. And when he comes out and says the economy is booming, that's not necessarily leading to lower interest rates as well. So there's some mismatch, if you will, between some of what the president's talking about and really what he wants to accomplish on rates. The Fed's caught right in the middle, and we know politics is playing a little bit of a part here. Our Fed chairman's his term is up in August of next year. We had a Fed governor resign the last couple of weeks. He's named a temporary member of that Fed governor. We had two dissents calling for lower interest rates at the last FOMC. So there's clearly some attempts on the part of the administration to influence rates lower. It's just hard to see that they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be that successful in that attempt as we move forward.
I was going to say, it does feel like Trump is a bit more aggressive and maybe even intrusive in the process. What is the danger of the president getting involved as far as instead of the Fed remaining independent? Is that dangerous monetary policy?
It is, Rick. It is dangerous monetary policy. The Fed needs to be independent in their decision. In fact, if you just look at the difference between well-developed economies and those that are emerging or have way more volatility in their economic fortunes, the independence of a central bank is a key aspect of how you separate that because the interests of politicians will tend to be more short-term in nature, and that generally doesn't lead to necessarily better economic outcomes. So we do think it's important that the Fed retains their independence. I think the actual ability of the president to influence that is relatively limited. It's a 12-member board. Every person gets one vote. So it would just be unlikely that he would be able to influence the entire board. But you bring up another really important part. It does feel different because President Trump is the first president that's really doing this out on social media. Anybody in the markets these days now, you almost have to have a Truth Social account so you can just follow what the president is saying on an ongoing basis, be that tariffs or interest rates or foreign policy. So much of that is out on the social media. That is different. I will say this: if we look at past actions by presidents and Fed chairman, President Trump is being no more aggressive than what we've seen in the past. It's just so much more in the public eye than it's been in the past. And I think that's where, for all of us, Rick, at times, this whole process can feel a little bit uncomfortable. The language, I mean, when you're calling your Fed chair a moron or too late Jay, or you're kind of throwing this almost sophomoric language around, it just lessens the respect, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean that underlying that there are valid reasons to disagree with what the Fed's doing. There always is. I could build a case for the Fed to cut rates. I could build a case for the Fed to keep rates the same. I could build a case that their next move could even be to raise interest rates, that inflationary pressures could come back. The point is, it's always hard to divine the future of what our economy and what inflation might do. I think the Fed and the institution itself takes a long-term view, and they try to make the best decisions they can. And having them be able to do that without being concerned about the political implications of that is important for the independence of that decision-making process.
Steve, anything else you'd like
And
to
I think
mention? Oh, yeah.
well, we're all better off if that continues. I mean, the fact is, we know it's if this is all about short-term political desires and what that may mean, and as power shifts from one party to another, and we have all these differing types of plans and paths that they want to take. Having that stability of monetary policy is one way to kind of give a little bit of a check and balance and our overall system. If we think about the difference between the executive and the legislative branch and the judiciary, that's all about having those checks and balances. And the Fed plays an important part of this. I think the Fed's doing a good job, Rick. There's reasons, valid reasons to be critical, but man, there's a lot of moving parts out there, and this economy, our economy, is diverse. But I'll end this call the way we did the last time. Longer term, Rick, we remain way more optimistic than pessimistic. There's some great things going on in our economy, so we feel like the future is very bright as we move forward.